Hello and welcome back to Brewbound Frontlines, our monthly conversation with leaders and retailers across the beer industry about topics affecting their business. I'm Jess Infante, back in the Brewbound studio and joined remotely by my colleague, Brewbound editor Justin Kendall. Hey, Justin, how are you?
I'm okay. How you doing, Jess?
I'm pretty good. Day 2 in the studio. It's very fancy, much fancier than my living room. So
I am jealous of your fancy setup.
yeah, I decided the entire beer industry no longer needed to see my home bar with illustration of the Jersey Devil on it. So we'll definitely do this from now on. So let's dive in. Our conversation today is an important one, and we've got some of the most influential women in the movement here to discuss it. As I'm sure just about everybody knows, the beer industry has undergone a reckoning with the way that it has treated women and female identifying people working within it. Now that thousands of stories of abuse, harassment, and mistreatment are out in the open, our guests are all working in different ways to make lasting, meaningful changes. So here to discuss the events of the past 2 months and everything going forward with us today are Brienne Allan, the production manager of Notch Brewing in Salem, Massachusetts. Hey, Brienne, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here with us. We also have Ren Navarro, the founder of Beer Diversity based in Toronto, Canada. Hey, Ren, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining. We also have Jen Blair, who is now the Beer and Quality Education Manager at Orpheus Brewing in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Jen.
Hey, how are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Great. So glad you're here. And we also have Ash Eliot, who is the founder of Women of the Bevolution, an advocacy group working to support and further the careers of women in the craft beer, wine, and spirits industries. And Ash is in Los Angeles. What's up, Ash?
Hey, how you doing? It's good to be here.
So 2 months ago, Brienne posted a simple question on her personal Instagram account. What sexist comments have you experienced? And in doing this, she unwittingly opened the floodgates to the decades of pent-up frustration and pain women in the beer industry have been carrying. In the weeks that followed, industry employees, mainly women, shared their experiences of sexual harassment, assault, and discrimination. In some cases, the uncovering of these stories led to the resignations of brewery founders and executives. We saw major changes at breweries such as Modern Times and Tired Hands and a few more, but there have been a lot of other breweries where many stories have come out that not much has changed. So we're going to talk about all these different things today. But first, let's set the scene. Brienne, can you tell us about the day that led to asking you that question on Instagram?
Yeah. So it was actually one of the first days that restrictions were lifted and we were allowed to be at work with other employees. And we headed down to our new location, just excited to be out of the house and out of quarantine for once. And it's funny because the past 5 years I've been doing this locally and it's been making a big impact in Massachusetts. And I kind of just forgot about it over the last year and a half because I wasn't around sexism because I was in my fucking house. And then I was just so mad. The first day I left, I went to build our new brew house at our new facility. And I got so many random comments from just guys on the site. And I just totally forgot how prevalent sexism is just because I haven't been working. And so I just was is anyone else experiencing this? Or did everyone forget this is a thing? And so it just made me so mad. I just started posting.
Yeah, and the stories came in from everywhere. Yeah. And I know I assume it was pretty overwhelming for you. So how did it feel to become the conduit for hundreds of women's trauma?
Pretty awful. It's still pretty traumatic right now. Just reliving basically all of these, not even just women, everyone's trauma that has sent it to me. I feel like I'm reliving all of mine, and then everyone that's reading their traumas are reliving their traumas. And I feel like we're all just in a state of mourning right now. And I haven't really shaken it yet. I'm still only halfway through the messages that I've gotten. I was telling Justin earlier, I'm only hitting messages I received 8 weeks ago. And this has been going on way longer than that. So Instagram is really poorly organized. So I can't tell how many are actually hidden in my requests. But every time I delete 50, it just still says there's over 100 left in there. So it's terrible. It's a terrible feeling. But I'm glad that it's helping people. At least I hope it is,
I'm sure it is. It's traumatic, but also cathartic. I know for some people, the stories that poured out weren't very surprising. I know I personally was like, yes, of course, this is what's going on. But I've also worked in the industry for 10 years. And women have encountered abuse like this across several industries for centuries. Were there any accounts that that came to you that were so egregious that they shocked you?
Yeah, I mean, anything that concerned like sexual assault and rape and that hadn't been resolved or talked about or just completely ignored were all very obviously shocking. It's like my worst fear ever. And just reading people's accounts of it, it's just like it's like having nightmares like constantly like about being raped. And it's like these women actually lived it. And so I think the one that shocked me the most, there were a couple, the one from the Master Brewers Association where a woman went and took a class there and then she was raped by a fellow classmate from some other brewery and then she just never told anybody and because she didn't think anyone would believe her. And I went to that class and I was one of 4 women in a class of 50 and I was just like, that could have fucking happened to me. Like I was at the same exact situation. So I think that one struck home for me the most out of all of that.
That's horrific. There's nothing more I can say about that.
Right,
Jen,
especially when you're there with nobody else around you and you don't know all these people that you're literally bunking with for 2 weeks and there's no one there for you to talk to or like anything. So terrifying.
and that's so much of the stories that have come out. I mean, we are about ready to go back on the road to events such as CBC. And there were a number of stories about women who have been assaulted at those events as well. And so it's definitely raising a question of how we can provide safe spaces when we're going back out on the road to these massive events. So switching gears a little bit, Jen, you saw all of this unfolding on Instagram and realized you were unconvinced that actionable change could occur at your former employer. You publicly tendered your resignation and left the company. That cannot be an easy decision to make, but it is a stand that you took. How did you arrive at that decision?
You know, it was really, it wasn't just with Brienne posting the stories. It was a culmination that had been building for over a year of seeing issues within the company, as I stated in my my resignation letter, repeatedly seeing instances of racism and sexism not being heard, not being remediated, pushed under the rug, being minimized. And continuing to push the leadership and say, hey, I noticed that you never scheduled that diversity training. You said you were going to schedule. Why not? When will you be scheduling it? And repeatedly running up against those walls of not receiving answers, or really just not receiving answers, or getting pushback when I would bring up ideas and let's do this and have we considered this. And I had been talking about various experiences with women at the brewery. There weren't that many women who worked there. There aren't that many women who work there now. And individually and as groups, we would share stories. And so it was one of those things where I knew it wasn't just me that it was happening to, and also hearing women throughout the company sharing similar experiences that they didn't know other people in other departments were having the same issues. And, for me, realizing that it was a prevalent issue, it wasn't just happening to me. It wasn't only in my department, it was in every department. And talking with other advocates about sharing these stories, and it's kind of the same thing, that once you share them all and see them all in the same place, like Jess said, there's so much that you're like, oh yeah, that always happens. And why do we all think that this is okay? Why do we continue to think that this is acceptable for us to be treated this way, for our employers to be treating us this way? And, finally that week, I sent an email at the beginning of the week to the leadership saying, this is happening on Brienne's page. I'm a woman within this company. What are you doing to ensure that I'm safe? What are you doing to ensure all of your employees are safe? And given my track record of challenging these kinds of ideas within the company, it didn't really come as a surprise to anyone, but the response was, well, we learned about this last Friday and we've been aware of it. And I said, okay, great. What conversations have you had? Nothing, silence, just we've been aware of it. And, it was like, okay, well, you've had like 4 days now. So what are you doing about it? And the response was, well, we're going to have you form a committee of women and you can tell us what actions to take. I said, that's not, you're asking me to educate you on how you were mistreating me. That's not how it works. What are you specifically as the leadership doing? What personal responsibility are you taking? And the responses continue to be, well, you'll form a committee of women and also we'll get training for managers. And, it was all of the same thing that I had seen repeated the year before with the Black Lives Matter movement. And, I had known better this time around. So I continued pushing and saying, what are we doing though? But what are you doing though? And receiving the same kind of responses that I had seen. So I knew how it was going to play out. And being an advocate for women within the industry, outside of my job, as well as within my job, I wasn't going to be part of that farce. And I couldn't stay there and then still go out and face all of the women that I face in the industry to encourage them to be involved in the industry, knowing that, my company is rotten from the roots and isn't actually dedicated to making a change. So it certainly wasn't an easy decision leading up to it, or I wouldn't say that it wasn't a hard decision once that was clear that it was my option. It was all of the days leading up to that, where I was continuing to push to say, okay, if you don't care, just say you don't care. And that way we're all on the same page and it's all out in the open, but we don't need to be doing this performative thing because your employees need you to do better for them. And everyone can see through performative allyship.
We know you're not alone in being in these situations. So what advice would you give to other women in the industry or anyone who finds themselves in a similar position?
It's really difficult. And I know I've spoken with women who are still at their employers where they've had these similar experiences. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of completely justifiable reasons why people need to stay in the jobs that they're in. And also you're not guaranteed that it's going to be better somewhere else. So one of the things that women can do, I think, one is talk to each other about it, because there is a lot of effort spent, particularly in some companies with leadership, to isolate you and try to compartmentalize your experience. So you do think that this is only happening to me and it's not okay for me to talk to other people about it. But sharing those stories helps create the solidarity and makes you see that there is a pattern. And, doing that, talking with each other is one thing you can do. Ask your employer for your handbook. Know what your retaliation policy is, know what the harassment policy is, know what the reporting structure is. And at this point, that shouldn't surprise anybody in the brewing industry to be asked those questions. And they should have that ready for you. And, if you're in ownership right now and you haven't made those things available for your employees, you need to do that right away. And really with employees, one of the things I've seen the most is them not understanding how much power they actually have. If a taproom manager doesn't show up to work for one day, that's probably inconvenient for a few people. If an entire taproom doesn't show up to work one day, that taproom is shut down. And I can guarantee they'll listen to you really quickly if you not only understand how much power you have, but also exercise that power.
Yeah, I think there's one thing that we've really seen in the past couple months, and it's that if you're being made to feel like you should be quiet, there's probably a reason for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, a lot of what we've seen since May is that women are at the base of this, women are just fighting for a place in the industry and want to be seen as equal contributors, deserving of the same dignity that men receive. And Ren, in your experience running beer diversity, you encounter all sorts of clients throughout, beer, wine, and spirits. But how receptive do you think breweries are going to be to receiving this message?
Now it's incredibly important. But when I started, 3.5 years ago, people said, we don't need it. It's fine. Look, we're good. We're one big happy family. Like, why are we talking about diversity, and why is this a concern? And pandemic hits and things are happening, and then all of these stories are coming out that we all knew about, and suddenly they're just banging down the door saying, oh, actually, I guess you were right all that time ago. And it's like, yeah, I've been in the industry for almost a decade. It's always been like this. It's always been a problem. So I think that they are becoming receptive, some out of necessity, and some are just realizing, like, yeah, it's a thing that we have to put on the front burner, because we can't ignore it. Or people are demanding so much more. I mean, like Jen said, if your tap room walks out, like, you're kind of screwed. So it's, yeah, I think it's definitely changed.
Absolutely. I mean, mutiny as a thought exercise, I think we've seen it in a few instances lately. So, we've watched the beer industry try to grapple with social injustice issues before. Ren, are there any reasons to believe that this time is going to be different?
I'm cautiously optimistic, and I want to say that yes, it's going to be different, but deep down inside, I'm like, it's not going to be different. Too many people still get a pass. When this came out, the amount of guys that I know who have seen what I've gone through for the last decade said, holy shit, can you imagine this? Can you believe this happened? And it was like, buddy, like, how many women in the industry, and how many women in the industry do you know that aren't in the industry anymore? And I think that there was this definite uprising of shock and horror, and what do we do now? And those same people who yelled very loudly, what do we do now, have moved on to something new. And I think that it's, again, left to those who are affected by it in the most negative of ways to be the ones who have to keep pushing it forward. I think that you are speaking to us for a reason, because we are the people who will not stop talking about it. But it's where are the guys, where are the owners, where are the people who are in these positions of privilege, how many months in? And again, this is how many months in after how many years of us going through this. I love that people are surprised by it. And it's like, are you also surprised that the sun rises and sunsets every day? Because this is just the thing that constantly happens. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll keep going, but I think the reason we will keep talking about it is because of women like us. And I think that we would all love to take a nap for a day or 2 or 3 or a month and have someone else step up and do it. And that is the point that I don't think will happen. I don't think that someone will step up and say, you know what, y'all look tired, I got you.
So speaking of stepping up, Ash, what can individuals do to get through to unreceptive leaders about issues of gender violence and equality in the industry?
Yeah, no, great question. I think in terms of what are you asking, like, individuals, meaning consumers, or like staff or industry professionals?
I'd say both,
Everyone.
because what we've seen and talked about is sort of the unified voice can make a change, but whether that's employee, but also at the consumer level. And that's something Jess and I are also wondering about too, is because we need engaged consumers to also step up in this. And the question is, how engaged are they as well? And how we can get them engaged if they're not.
Yeah, so that's the thing. The consumers have so much power, right? When it comes down to it, consumers are going to help us change this industry. They can ask the tough questions. They could, go to breweries and see what they're doing to create these, safe and inclusive spaces. They can, look at the code of conduct and see if it matches, with how it is in the tap room, and how their social media is, and how their website is, and all that, and what they're doing in the community. And that's the thing. Like, if consumers are not engaged, that's a huge problem, because they're pretty much investing in companies that are toxic environments. And the question is, like, as a consumer, how would you feel working in a place like this? Like, that's what they should think about. Like, do I want to invest my money in this brewery? How would I feel working here? Would it be safe for me? Would it be safe for my friends? Like, would I have the proper resources and the support? So I think that's how, consumers, again, can keep kind of these businesses accountable.
Question for all of you, actually. People who might not pay as much attention to this as, the six of us do, maybe might sense that the momentum has slowed. So do you guys believe that the momentum for the movement has stalled? And if so, why? And if it has slowed, how can we reignite it? Brienne, judging from the sound of your Instagram inbox, that's definitely not the case. So what do you think the greater industry is perceiving the momentum to be right now?
Well, that's not necessarily true. So though I do have thousands of messages still in there, they're from back when this first started. They all just accumulated to the point where I couldn't get to them until now. And even now I'm only getting to like 5 or 10 a day because it's just so much. I think it's stalling because I think a lot of people like to pretend they give a shit about things, and then when it's too exhausting for them or it's not convenient anymore, they just stop and hope that it goes away. And I mean, it's happened for every single national beer collab there's ever been. It's every time, it's just like news. It's popular for a week and then it's gone. No one really cares. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a great, if very depressing point. How can we reignite the momentum?
Well, we're hoping with the collaboration we can, or the continuing of posting the stories and just talking about it. We've gotten a lot of requests for public speaking, or different organizations and companies have been reaching out to be like, can you help us? We actually want to change and not just talk about it on Instagram. We actually need like help. Like, can you point us in like directions that we can make a change? And the people that actually go out of their way to figure those things out seem to be continuing the conversation within their company and with their consumers, which I feel like is very proactive.
Jen, what are you sensing in Atlanta? What does the general momentum of this current movement seem to be in the South?
In Atlanta, one of the things, so I've been here for almost 2 years now, and one of the things that's blown me away is how different the Atlanta culture and the Atlanta beer culture is from other cities where I've lived and other beer communities I've been a part of. And I see, perhaps it's also because I'm here and I'm involved day to day with other people in the industry who have a vested interest in moving the conversation forward. But I see more people continuing to push for, historically excluded people to be involved in the brewing industry, as, throughout the industry, from consumers to being in the brew house. I think that is, again, I'm coming from kind of a biased point of view. I do agree with Brienne. I get disheartened to see that, once sharing stories didn't seem as salacious, people stopped paying attention. And I frequently remind people, hey, every single woman in the beer industry can tell you 10 stories like what you saw shared, and you need to remember that. And I have seen people who have changed their purchasing behavior based on stories that have come out. I've had people check in with me to say, hey, what about this place? Is this on the okay list? And I've seen the community checking in with each other to say, what breweries haven't been called out, what breweries have a good reputation, because that's where I'm going to go from now on. So I don't think that it hasn't stalled. I think that all of the behind the scenes work is still moving forward in some places. I do agree that, like my former employer, a week after I resigned, was saying that this had all blown over and it was something they didn't need to worry about anymore. But I'm hoping that that's the exception and not the rule. I know at my current employer, it's something that we're actively addressing, throughout the company. I think it will be interesting in a few months, particularly as the collaborations start to get released, to remind people, hey, go back and check on those breweries who posted a statement the same way we were reminding people, hey, go back and check on those breweries who posted a black square a year ago, see where they are, go take a look at their About Us page, at their employees, and see if you can gauge what kind of priority they've given to actually being inclusive within their hiring practices. And I think consumers are becoming more aware, and like Ash said, aware of the power that they actually wield to continue to challenge these people and say, this is a crowded marketplace. You need to earn my patronage now. So it's not as big of a splash every single day as it was, but I do hold out hope that we're not seeing all of the work in the background, which is what we want, right? Like that's the progress we want, is all of these employers to come out and say, we revised our code of conduct. This is the training we've given to people. Yes, we should have been doing it all along, but we're doing it now. And this is how we've decided to move forward.
So I know we said we would take this question to all four of you, and Ren and Ash will absolutely, you guys weigh in on the momentum aspect. But in the interest of momentum of a conversation, now that we've brought up Brave Noise, I do want to dive into that because I think that's a really important thing to make sure we tell our audience all about. So Brave Noise is a global collaboration beer announced earlier this month. All of you are working on it. Unlike previous collaboration beers with philanthropic goals, participating breweries are required to submit their code of conduct. So Brienne, walk us through the creation of this project and the thinking that went into it.
It definitely wasn't my idea. Ash probably knows about it way more than I do.
Ash, tell us all about it.
This was all Brienne's idea. And, she had brewed this beer and people were asking like, hey, like, is this going to be a collaborative brew? Can we brew it? We want to do something too. And, Brienne had this great idea. Well, why don't we, let's make it a global collab. Let's create this initiative. And she had come to me because she knew I was kind of creating all these resources for women in the industry. And I was just trying to connect women with other women. And so we kind of, brainstormed a bit of like, what do we want out of this? How can we make this collab different than the other collabs that have been out there, like Black is Beautiful and All Together? And, though we personally cannot hold the breweries accountable, we have framed it in a way that there are steps and actions that they have to take. So, the first off, it's committing to the long-term work for change in the industry. It's like having a code of conduct and, making sure it checks all these boxes, that it is focused on safe and inclusive environments for staff and consumers, and submitting that. And obviously, breweries have been coming to us about like questions about it. We have a great HR resource, Rebecca Weaver from HR Uprise, who has created a guide for them and is available for consulting. So we want to give them all the tools to create this and make sure it does reflect their environment, their business, their values. So obviously not everyone's going to have that at once. We just ask that they create this and have it available publicly, whether it's QR code on the beer, if it's publicly in the tap room, on the website, by the time they release the Brave Noise beer. And then the other step is donating a majority of the proceeds to a verified nonprofit. And we have a list of all these nonprofits on the website. And if anyone else has one that reflects the mission, they can submit it. We'll look it over, we'll review it, we could add it to our list. But these nonprofits are advocating for safe spaces. They're creating resources for hospitality workers. They're providing, mental health support, sexual harassment training, diversity training. So, it kind of reflects this initiative and what we want for this industry. And that's how I feel that this collab is different than others.
I just want to make one point that I love how both of you attempted to not take credit and give credit to the other person, because I have been in other jobs in past lives. I've been in plenty of meetings where guys basically fall all over each other to take the credit for the good ideas. So great collaboration.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. I'm grateful to be part of it. So thank you, Brienne, for bringing me in.
Yeah, so we actually got a few people reaching out to us asking if we were going to make, I remember our brewer Gillet and I came out with Brave Noise, and a lot of different breweries are reaching out to me. Is this recipe going to be available? What have you? And then Stout Collective, who actually facilitated those other 3 global collabs, reached out and they were like, this could be the next one. And we actually turned it down for a couple of weeks because we were like, every time somebody does a global collab like this, everyone finds out later that nobody actually donated, and then like racist behavior was still happening in breweries that created Black is Beautiful, and like they kept the money, and like, so we were like, we don't want to do this because we don't want to perpetuate this like whitewashing of just anti-sexist, anti-racist, pro-equality behavior just because they made a fucking beer that says that, oh, this is what we believe. So we're trying to make it so that consumers and other people in the industry can hold these breweries accountable, because you can't just post something on fucking Instagram and then expect people to just believe you and be able to see your actual like actions to make a difference. Not saying that this will solve that, but at least they will care enough to try, I guess.
So how many breweries have signed up so far to take part?
Well, so we're giving it a couple of weeks before we dive into the list, just because like even Notch couldn't really sign up yet, because we don't even have like a code of conduct written for like consumer views. We have obviously an employee handbook that outlines all of that, but we wanted to really take the time to make sure we had like a meaningful outline of what we wanted the consumers to know, as well as like our employees. So we actually haven't even registered yet because we're just like so into picking the right charity we want, trying to figure out how much money it's going to generate, trying to create an event, getting the ingredients and the code of conduct all together at one time so we can release it as like one package. So we'll probably start releasing the breweries that have signed up on the actual website so people can keep checking in, just like the Black is Beautiful one did. It's at the bottom. So, but a lot of breweries are, you know, realizing they don't have a code of conduct. So it's going to take a while for them to draft one up to be able to participate.
Yeah, and to Brienne's point, like we knew that it was going to take a few weeks for everyone to just get their ducks in a row, so to speak. But tons of breweries have reached out. They've been emailing us. They've been direct messaging me and Brienne, and just, you know, they want us to know that they're going to apply, they're going to do it. We're just still figuring out. We want to make sure we have the code of conduct. We want to make sure we have the resources before we are submitting. And even like home brewers, we've actually had like tons of home brewers. And thank you, Jen, who helped create the homebrew recipe, and also SoCal Cerveceros, my homebrew club here in LA. And I think with those efforts, it's just kind of like, just immediately, like the whole community just exploded and was like, yes, I want to be involved. So it's been great feedback. Obviously, it's going to take a minute for, you know, the breweries to kind of submit. And then we also have a clause for beer drinkers, how they can, you know, get involved and keep a lookout and ask their local brewery if they're going to be participating.
So I want to get back to the subject of keeping the momentum moving on the movement. Ren, what are you noticing in Canada? Are people still concerned about the news that's come out over the past 2 months, or do you think people are starting to move on?
Split. I think it's, you know, the beer nerds of the world who are really dialed into what's happening with craft breweries are noticing it. I think that the momentum is slowing because the world is on fire and there's like 8 million other things that people will be distracted by. But I always hope that they kind of come back to it. But I think that the people in the general public are like, cool, what happened? I'm still going to go and buy that beer. You know, name any big brewery that's had a large kerfuffle in the last few years, and they're still running and they're still super popular. So again, you know, cautiously optimistic, but I'm with Brienne. Like, people are just like, yeah, that was terrible. So what's next? Like, you know, and it's this thing that if you are not in the industry and you're not seeing it every day, you've forgotten about it. And I think that the the real challenge is, how do we keep this in front of people's faces, and how do we keep it in front of those who are faithful to breweries? And those are people who are not like, the craft beer nerds who are like on, Untapped and checking everything in. It's the guy who goes and buys 1, 2, 4 every 3 days of the same thing, who doesn't understand that he's supporting someone who's absolutely terrible. And how do we get them to understand that? And I think that's part of the big challenge, is that we need to stop screaming into the vacuum that we all reside in.
One thing I'm sort of wondering is, how do we strike the balance or even consumers, how do they strike a balance of supporting the employees that have risen up at some of these breweries, like at Tired Hands or Modern Times, while not supporting the old leadership? Because I mean, there are a lot of folks that are left behind trying to right a ship. And so you've got these breweries that have, besmirched names, and I wonder, how do we support those employees?
I don't think there's a happy medium, like, to be honest, right? Like, I don't think you're gonna be like, well, I want to support them because my best friend still works there. I think part of it is you as a consumer, don't leave it to us to make the stand, say something. Like, you got a bunch of followers, even if you have 25 followers, who cares? Start saying, this isn't cool, and my friend has stayed because they have to stay, so this is not okay. Like, I mean, just talk about it.
Yeah, it's a huge gray area, and I've been in constant contact with all of the employees at Tired Hands, which is just still completely unresolved. And so I even have consumers messaging me being like, I really like Tired Hands, but like, fuck that. But also, we really want to help the employees. Like, what do we do? And so I asked the employees, what do you want me to say when like someone asks me that? And they say, well, please keep buying it so we can have a job still. And which is super important. We don't want to, penalize people that haven't done anything wrong. But at the same time, it's like, how do you, yeah, sure. The CEO said that they stepped down, or like the owner is, and during, daily operations, yeah, they're still making money. But I think it's important that as long as those people aren't like hurting people anymore, like whatever, as long as they're not there assaulting and abusing people, then I would say it's totally fine to keep supporting those breweries, as long as they're trying to make a change and stop the abuse. That being said, it doesn't help that like Tired Hands owners like jumped ship a couple weeks ago, waited for shit to die down, and now they're like sending out emails to their employees begging to come back because they think everything has died down. And the employees are just like, are you fucking joking me right now? Like, we told you, like, we won't be here if you come back. And they're still trying to come back because they think it's all going to blow over, and they haven't changed a single fucking thing. So honestly, gray area, hard to say. Support the employees, offer them a job somewhere else.
Exactly.
Don't know what else to say about it.
Let's get them new jobs. That's what we should be doing. We should be sharing their stories, looking out for them, and trying to connect them with a place that is not toxic and hurtful.
One thing I keep coming back to is like, I myself had a pretty untenable and uncomfortable work situation, obviously many years and lifetimes ago, and I couldn't leave because I have a mortgage and student loan payments and all these things. And it was like, this is causing me such great distress and anxiety that the one thing that would make my life better right away is just to be able to not have to come to work here every day. I wonder if there's some kind of like mutual aid fund we can set up that would help support women and allow them to free themselves from these terrible toxic situations. I know that was something I heard from a few women at Boulevard when all of that happened in January. A lot of them were saying it was horrible, but it was my job and I needed it. So I don't know if that's something that, if there's organizations out there that can get put on the Brave Noise list. If you have one, let us know.
Yeah, Jess, to your point, actually on our list, we do have a few that are working directly with hospitality workers. I know during COVID, they were doing something like that. Another rally, and also hospitality action. And personally, I'm also trying to figure out how can I either fundraise or provide grants to women, in the industry so they could leave these toxic places and have just like some money coming in to get them to the next job, the next step. But yeah, if anyone, watching has recommendations as well, we're happy to add those to the list. I think that is top of mind.
That's great. Now, Ash, I know some brewery owners and leaders might be feeling a little overwhelmed at how to initiate change, and Women of the Bevolution has a bevy of resources to help them. So how can they get started?
Yeah, I think first step is, just looking at, looking at the hiring. Like if you're looking to hire new people and you have positions available, try to bring in diverse voices. And if you don't know where to go, you come to Women of the Bevolution. You can hit me up. You can hit up like Pink Boots or Beer Culture or anyone here even on this interview right now. But like I think that's really important is first, like, what does the tap room look like? Who's in on the production side? How can we bring in these other diverse voices? And then also looking at just overall, like going back to the code of content and the resources for staff and consumers, like what does that look like? Is it a safe environment? And bringing in a third party HR resource. I think that should be also like number one. Like as much as, it's important to have kind of transparency and be able to talk with your staff, they're not going to be honest with you, especially if some shitty situations have happened. So you should bring in a third party HR to talk to the employees, see what their goals are, see how they're feeling in this environment. And then from there, figure out what is the plan, what is the long-term kind of plan to create this environment for them that is supportive, that helps them get to that next level in their career. So I think those steps are really important. And, even going back to consumers too, it's like, what are the safety procedures there? And, I recently discovered like Ask for Angela because it came out of the UK, and it's like, just the bartenders, are aware that if you ask for Angela at the bar, you need immediate help. We'll get you a lift. We'll get, security to escort you out. Or, Angel Shot is another initiative. So I think they need to figure out, how, these kind of steps, and then, it's better to face it on than not do it at all. So, so I hope they definitely take this seriously and figure out what are those third-party resources, and also look at other industries and other companies that are progressive and have these things in place already. Maybe talk to them and reach out and get some advice.
Great. Ren, I know you've had your consulting business for quite a few years now. And of course, the people who come to you are self-selecting, so they're ready to make this change. But for anybody who maybe is on the edge or, on the fence and they're not sure what to do, what's a great like first step that they can take right away?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that all of them did it because they wanted to. I have had people reach out who are kind of like, I got caught. What do I do now? I have the reactive and the proactive clients, and I think that it's the question, right? Like, are you in trouble? Yes or no? If it's no, then you're being proactive, and I think that is a really important piece, is to kind of take a look. And if you're trying to make the effort, it really makes it a lot easier to utilize the resources to come out to me. And I think that the thing that people have to remember is it is a long-term work commitment. Like this is not a, hey, so we told people we'd have this done by July 31st. We'll have like some paperwork done by like mid-August, and then everything's done by September. Like that, it's not how it works, right? This is the world's shittiest lifetime marathon. You will have 2 good miles and the rest will burn your lungs. And you have to be prepped for it. Like, and you have to think of it in terms of, I didn't do it to tick off a box. And also understand that I will not always want to work with you. There are a lot of places that I'm just like, I kind of just want to fight you in the parking lot. Like I don't actually want to work with you. And it's just because you work with any of us or interact with any of us, it doesn't mean that you got a gold star. That's, I don't give out gold stars for you being a half decent human. And I think that it's with this stuff, you have to understand that you're going to have to look at yourself in different ways. And it's the same, like you don't get to call yourself an ally. You don't get to call yourself a nice guy. Like someone else has to tell you that that's what you are. And you have to understand that you can lose that. And I think that is part of what breweries have to realize and have to understand, that you can say you create a safe space, but if any of us told you it's not a safe space, well, guess what? It's not a safe space. So I think that those are the pieces that people really have to keep in mind and have to understand, that are so incredibly important when you're doing the work. And at the end, you don't get to stand up on the top of the hill and say, look at me, I'm great. Nah, you're okay.
God, you are so, so right. Jen, you just started a new job. How did your past experiences affect the way that you viewed your onboarding process? And what should employees at other companies be looking for to know that they're going to be supported?
So I think one of the most important things you can do, and I did this when I was speaking with Jason, who's the CEO of Orpheus, I had known from his personal social media presence, also Orpheus's social media presence, that my values aligned, at least with what I was seeing on social media. I also had friends who worked there who had been there for long term, who I'd asked about it as well, about what is it like to be an employee there. And during our, the first time we talked about me joining the team, we had a very candid conversation with about a lot of things. And I was, I was in a more unique position in that we were creating space for me there. And that's, very much a luxury that most people don't have. But when you're talking to an employee, and when you're talking to a potential employer, you have a very vested interest in making sure that you will be safe and not discriminated against, and have an expectation to be able to move up within the company and be supported in all of those things, and be supported through access, through resources, and like Ren said, that it's a continuing thing that your employer will provide to you. Ask those questions, because you deserve those. Those are all basic things that you should have in a job that so many of us are conditioned to believe is a privilege, and it's not. Those are basic needs as an employee. And ask those questions. And if the employer doesn't have an answer for you, you have an answer for yourself about whether you would like to be employed there or not, because an employer who is in it for the long haul is going to be able to say, these are the policies, this is, these are our philosophies, these are our values, we do everything according to this. And also here's proof of all of those things that we do and continue to do. And, if you're looking around the room and you don't see anyone who looks like you, ask, why aren't there people who look like me? One of my favorite questions to ask when I'm on an interview is, what is your turnover rate? What's your attrition? How long do people stay here on average? How many people who work here, have been promoted to their positions from within the company? How often do you hire outside of the company? Because a lot of times that's going to tell you about what your experience is going to be like as an employee there.
Excellent insight. Okay, final question for each of you. At times, the news of the past few months has felt really heavy. What is one thing that you've encountered that's made you feel hopeful? Let's start with you, Brienne.
Nothing. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
I'm not hopeful for anything. Honestly, we haven't seen a single change anywhere, and I don't believe we're going to. I'm sorry, but I just don't.
No need to be sorry. I really kind of tend toward your line of thinking here. I do remember you sharing a few stories from people who had wrote in to say that, former coworkers had said to them, like, I'm so sorry that you had gone through this.
Right, for sure. There have been personal accounts, people acknowledging like things that they've done wrong. I just don't see, there's not enough people being, fired or under fire for what they've been called out or accused of doing. And like I said earlier, people are just waiting till all of this blows over so they don't have to deal with it anymore. It's really nice that there are day-to-day like employee interactions that are getting acknowledged, and people are reaching out to some of the victims and just being like, I'm so sorry I didn't help you. I was there when I saw that and I didn't do anything. So I'm glad there is change in that aspect, which is nice, but not like from the people actually assaulting people. And so, yeah.
I mean, you are right that it's sad that I'm here being like, oh, this bare minimum, what a wonderful thing that happened. But
Right.
yeah. Ash, what's one thing that's made you feel a little hopeful?
First off, I think we're all fucking exhausted, and I just need to have a little sip for my voice before I get into this answer. I have to say that, like, I do see some changes, right? I mean, it's not going to happen instantly. It's going to take time. And what I honestly really want is for women to leave these toxic places. And I think that's starting to happen, and finding those male allies or collaborators that they can work with in a, more supportive environment and grow their careers. And I hope more women start their own businesses. I mean, honestly, that's my next step too, is like, I want to like start a VC firm and like figure out, how do we fund these women? How do we help them find those collaborators and male allies too, that will help, fund these businesses that they want to start. So I think that, like, yeah, there's small changes here and there. It's going to take a while, and we're all going to be exhausted. And when it comes down to it, it's like the leaders of the industry need to start speaking up. And until that happens, then I think here and there's going to be some changes, and it's getting the right people in those leadership roles, getting the diverse voices, and again, hopefully more women starting their own businesses and really kind of taking over the industry in this way.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of being exhausted, Ren, I know you've changed your Twitter handle to Ren the Exhausted, and I'm right there with you. Where are you drawing your energy from right now?
I don't know. I'm old. Bloodbaths? I don't know. I really don't know. I think that part of it too is, I'm like, I always say that I'm like cautiously optimistic about things, but I've always been cautiously optimistic, and I think I was born tired. But being a Black woman in anything is automatically exhausting, and so I'm really just here to show the haters, like, screw you, I'm just going to keep going. Yeah, I'd love to nap for about 3 years, but if I give up, they win, and that's the last thing that I need in my life. So I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me going. It's absolute spite. It is spite that keeps me going.
I am like 150% powered by spite.
Yes.
Jen, we'll give you the last word. What is one thing that's making you feel a little bit hopeful or energized?
I'll build off what Ren said with being spite. My general attitude every day now is, let's just burn it down. There are so many things in the industry that don't serve most people. So let's just get rid of it. And I've been fortunate to connect with other people within the industry who share those views and say, okay, yeah, this association isn't serving us anymore, or this society is not speaking for me in a way that makes me feel heard. Let's just do it ourselves and let people make their choices. But it's slow, and it's seeing those little bits of light through the cracks of it starting to break down, of women seeing that these stories didn't just happen to them. Also being reminded that, oh yeah, a lot of that stuff that happens to me now that I just politely laugh off is actually unacceptable, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And seeing more and more people understand that is, that's their power, and kind of joining me in the rally cry of, let's just burn it all down. So my energy source, I guess, is mass arson.
That was perfect. Final question. I think there's one tool out there available to pretty much the entire industry that I think really could make some meaningful progress. So Ash, why don't you tell us about the NotMe anonymous reporting app, because I'm sure a lot of our viewers should be really interested in it.
Yeah, so NotMe is a free app for employees to report misconduct in the workplace, and then they'll be connected with the best resources, in regards to like legal aid and anything else that they need. And NotMe actually has created a page within the app that is just for the beer industry, and they've been super supportive. Also the founder also co-owns a law firm called Empower Law, which has also provided some free legal aid as well for those in the industry. So I definitely recommend downloading the app, and if you need that resource, it's a safe place to just report any misconduct. And also the app can work with businesses to create like almost like a page for that business. And if any of these breweries need that sort of reporting tool that is anonymous, I'd say like reach out to NotMe and they can build out that tool for you.
Fantastic. So great place to leave it. That's our show. Huge thanks to Brienne, Ren, Ash, and Jen for joining us. Thank you guys for taking part in this really important conversation. And I'm really glad that you're able to help us keep the momentum on this movement going. Thank you to everybody at home for tuning in. And as always, a huge thank you to our video team for making this all look and sound great. Thank you to everybody for watching.